The Workday lawsuit. When obstruction masquerades as efficiency, how an industry built to generate revenue by denying employment became a multi-billion-dollar rejection machine. Hi, my name is Sarah Trumbull. I'm the founder and CEO of the Job Applicant Perspective, the first anonymous user reviews for job ads across the U.S. Think about like Yelp in a world of professionally mandated fine dining with no health department and no FDA. Yeah. So this is a level of go-to-market awareness as well as public service for all the gaslighting out there. I'm driving at a paradigm shift. So I do a lot of education. I make this blog that comes out a couple times a week. I also do this in video and audio format, and many of the usual podcasty types of channels, and on social media to make the argument in favor of the paradigm that I'm shifting and driving at more clear and present for everybody. So starting from the beginning, just bringing this into a practical moment with Workday. As I've spoken about ATSs before, and I want to speak specifically to this moment with them. Workday is being sued for discrimination. During the period covered by the lawsuit, its software tools rejected an estimated 1.1 billion, with a B, job applications. Billion. Think about how many other, ATS companies exist out there that you just know off the top of your head. Let's say 2, 3, 4 extra ones. Just put 4 out there. Times 1.1 billion by 4 extra. Then, multiply it by however many extra years that were included, because this was only from 2020 to now. You get an idea of what it's like to use this professional job market. The proposed class could include hundreds of millions of applicants, placing the case among the largest employment discrimination actions ever contemplated in the U.S. Coverage has largely settled on a familiar explanation: AI-biased algorithmic discrimination, systems that, if not carefully implemented, monitored, and maintained, can unintentionally reproduce inequality. The proposed remedies follow naturally: bias audits, human oversight, and humans kept in the loop. I'm not going to argue against any of those things. Those are all entirely true. And yet this blog post is meant to argue this framing is far too small. The nature of an ATS is in and of itself the collapse of the labor, is the problem. The problem isn't that bias has slipped into the filter. The problem is that filtering is bias. That's what filtering is. It's bias. That's what filters do. They exclude. The only question was ever who. Who this is for? It's for journalists looking beyond the individual AI bias algorithms to the structure of the market those tools serve. It's for employers who purchase filtering systems as efficiency tools and didn't ever really stop to ask the human impact of the workforce of the tools they bought. It's for job seekers who submitted hundreds of applications into silence and suspected the system was never designed to work for them. It's for friends, family, and neighbors of people forced to endure the emotional economic abattoir masquerading as a labor market. And it's for everyone in public policy, academia, unions, and advocacy. Unions. Beginning to realize what it means socially, professionally, financially to the U.S. workforce. They oversee that 1.1 billion rejections in a 5-year period by only one ATS company isn't evidence of a malfunction, but of a modern professional hiring system operating exactly as it was designed and intended. What everyone is saying, the coverage has been remarkably consistent. This is an AI bias case, algorithmic discrimination, a cautionary tale about what happens when automated hiring tools aren't carefully implemented, monitored, or maintained. The consensus solution follows neatly from that framing. Audit the models, add human oversight, keep a human in the loop, and hold vendors accountable. The story is comforting. It treats the problem as calibration, a fixable mistake, a system that mostly works but needs tuning. It isn't. What a filter actually is. A filter is a rejection machine. Filtering is not matching. Filtering in a matching marketplace like they're doing here would always create Nash's non-convergence equilibrium. It would always create Akerlof's lemons. That's what it would do. Filtering is not matching. A filtering is a rejection machine. That's the profit stream. Its job is to say no at scale, to introduce friction at scale, and sell that friction as efficiency. A system like this does not profit when people get hired. It profits when large numbers of people do not get hired. The longer applicants stay in the system, submitting, waiting, reapplying, the more value the filter produces. A 10% pass-through rate is not selectivity. It's a 90% friction rate. It's market failure by any other standard. Six Sigma would be horrified. That's not matching. That's obstruction, industrialized. In a healthy market, a no contains information. It tells you your price is too high, your quality is too low, or your offer is misaligned. In the filtering market, your silence is the product. That's what job seekers purchase with all of their effort, is silence. Opacity doesn't just confuse the users who drive its revenue unpaid. It communicates that they were not worth consideration at all, without ever having to acknowledge that judgment. This is distributed irresponsibility sold as professionalism. Trust theater, not trust. Credibility and transparency are carefully cultivated for the people who write checks while being systematically denied to the people whose time, energy, and labor generate all the revenue. Workday is an excellent example of this, why it's so profitable to be nice to employers, because then it means you don't have to be nice to job seekers, and it's so much profit that way. The job seeker experience described in the Workday lawsuit reveals something even more incriminating: how profitable it is to extract value from a population that you were never required to serve. Job seekers generate the data, the volume, and the legitimacy that makes the system valuable without receiving any of the protections, feedback, or accountability normally owed to revenue generators. They're not even choosing it. They don't know what they're choosing because it's all white labeled. White labeling ensures that what might have remained a distrusted vendor practice will have metastasized into market-wide condition when the entire workforce is forced to navigate without any trust mechanisms at all. Think about it this way, if you haven't thought about it. What if Chipotle, all taco restaurants were white labeled? So nobody knew that it was Chipotle that was causing the problem. A few years ago, I forgot how long it was ago. Yeah? But everybody needed to go to Mexican restaurants in order to get food at all. You would have a market operating without trust, a billion people operating without trust. That's what the labor market is. And that's only if you're thinking between 2020 and now. Totally ignoring all the ghost jobs that have been described in the evergreen roles that are openly documented for many years. White labeling ensures that what might have been a distrusted vendor is an entire market-wide condition. A matching system creates value when the market clears. A filtering system creates value when there's always a line at the door to justify its existence. These incentives are structurally opposite. Economists, you know this. You know this. You know this. And for the record, in what version of reality was digitized deference equivalent to digitized trust? We have never run a market on deference before until now. It's surprising how it doesn't work. What Workday is actually selling, not efficiency, not matching, not hiring. Workday sells exclusivity. That's what it does. The feeling of being the kind of company important enough to need protection from the flood of people trying to get in. In that model, the crowd at the door isn't a failure of the system. The crowd is the system. Their volume, their inelastic participation, their inability to opt out, that's what makes the exclusivity feel real. Workday is used by over 11,000 organizations worldwide and markets itself as helping companies elevate their people and move their business forward forever. Just for the record, I would like to state that 11,000 different employers hired someone to unemploy Americans or other people, hired someone to unemploy people at scale, to generate revenue, have them unpaid generate revenue for a company that would keep them unemployed. And they were cool with it. And public policy, economists, and unions knew about it, and they were cool with it too. I'm sorry, identity is a real thing. I get it. but also you have an Econ 101 degree, and all of those people needed you to use your logic. Like, their volume, their inelastic participation, their inability to opt out, that's what makes the exclusivity feel real. Workday is used by over 11,000 organizations worldwide, and that's not just Workday. It's all of them. The lack of due diligence involved in this behavior is off the charts incompetent. Itself as helping companies elevate their people and move their business forever. But look at how the system actually operates. In a lawsuit, one plaintiff applied at 12:55 a.m. and received a rejection less than 1 hour later. Another received automated rejections for hundreds of roles, often within hours, sometimes at odd times, outside business hours, indicating no human review. This is why the system is white labeled, no job seeker facing user experience, no explanations, no feedback, and no support. On purpose, right? That's the goal. If job seekers were stakeholders, there would be user experience insight taken to ensure their needs were met so contracts could be renewed. Job seekers, if they were the product, there would be user experience insight taken to ensure the product was being delivered efficiently to the customer. We know for sure from their fiscal year reports, job seekers are the revenue generators. They are not, in fact, the stakeholders, and they are not, in fact, the product, though. The lack of user reviews, by its nature, makes them neither. Job seekers in ATS-driven markets are economically mapped, filtered, and rendered visible even as their labor powers the perception of value for everyone else. Workday didn't fail to serve job seekers by accident. The system is designed to deliver exclusion, generating revenue by denying access to employment at scale with no meaningful accountability layer, no dedicated regulator, no federal guidance. What existed was removed in January 2025, no feedback loop. The product is status, identity, and insulation, and it is being delivered efficiently. Job seekers are the unpaid workforce producing it in a market they cannot opt out of, often without even knowing what an ATS is because the system itself is invisible on job postings. I want to do some mic drops here, like economic bars left and right. When you think it through, the level of horror I have in terms of the epic societal betrayal of this workforce from everybody who had every amount of training and responsibility to care and chose not to. It's something that we all need to reflect on because it speaks to the nature of human cognition that this happened. But it also is a thing that needs to be reflected on and carried by the people in charge because whether or not they meant to, they did. They chose this. And they chose not to look. And that's still part of the choice. And that needs to be integrated so that they can work towards that repair because the amount of repair that needs to be done economically, let alone psychologically, for this type of stochastic economic violence is impressive. We have an entire generation of people who, when they were down, the rest of society tried to hurt them, and called themselves leaders in doing so. Yikes. That's a lot of repair. Why bias was inevitable. Not because someone calibrated the algorithm wrong. Because when you build a rejection machine, optimize it for volume, and train it on historical exclusion, bias isn't a bug. It's the only possible outcome. As the complainant notes, if Workday's tools observe that an employer disfavors candidates from a protected class, the system will reduce how often those candidates are recommended. The system learns to exclude. That's what it was built to do. It just learns who to exclude from the patterns it's fed. You cannot audit your way out of that. You cannot oversight your way out of it. The architecture is the problem. In general, before we get to the algorithms, we have to get to the fact that what are we doing with the filtering mechanism in here in the first place? How are we getting it out of there? And then we can start working on those algorithms and finding them, fine-tuning them. But we're talking about, tuning the violins before we fix the basses, into be in tune. But the lawsuit gets right, and it does just things right. And what it misses, the plaintiffs were harmed, and they were harmed at scale. I say that, if you've already decided that the people licking watches can't be trusted, you never realize when you're creating a Radium Girl situation at scale, right? The court recognized something important. The injury wasn't rejection, but being denied the right to compete on equal footing. That matters. But the dominant framing, the AI was biased, still treats this as a technical error, something audits, oversight, and better monitoring can fix. They cannot. Workday is not an outlier. No. They're one of... It's the logical endpoint of an industry that has spent decades selling employers the feeling of exclusivity, using large-scale applicant exclusion as proof that the system is working, using large-scale unemployment of the U.S. population as proof that they did a good job. The real question isn't whether the filter was biased. The question is why we built a talent market out of obstruction machines and then called it efficiency. Why we allowed an industry to flourish that profited from unemploying the very Americans whose unpaid time drove their revenue in a market they could not opt out of, while white labeling its presence so they could not choose job ads that did not include it. In general, I come from systems theory into economics. So I would say this to the economists, like, I like your field. I think you have lovely principles here. I love first principles. You have lovely first principles. Stop abusing them. When your online labor market would make William Jevons, John Nash, and George Akerlof roll over in their graves, as well as be equivalent to shredding Rochen's role. Like, you got some thinking to do. And I get that cognitively it's hard to see that because of the nature of professionalism, but also some of this should have learned of people, and people were paid to do this. And like 25 years in, it's somebody who doesn't have a degree in the field that's doing this instead. It does really speak to cognitive architecture and also the fact that people needed to do better. Check the research. General economic theory. Akerlof, the market for lemons. I put them in there. He's good. The market. It's good. It's good stuff. Rochen's role, platform competition in two-sided markets. It's also a good one. For my own analysis, filtering versus matching, frame monopoly, and how online hiring plays Django with the economy, a job market for lemons, 3 roles of online job seekers, the laws of online hiring, 2 axioms and 1 corollary. I have my own creations too. I have a strong theory about empathy as clean data. Okay, reports on the case that I used. I put up several of them here, and I'll add them into the description here. But in the end, what the job applicant perspective is doing. The filtering industry will not fix this. Its business model depends on exclusion continuing at scale. Employers will not fix this, not yet. The dominant frame tells them the system is working and the workforce is the problem. Yeah, that leaves workers. Job applicant perspective is building the feedback layer that's been missing since hiring went online. Job seekers documenting what actually happens, warning each other where the dragons are, mapping which companies ghost, which postings are theater, and which systems function as black holes. Honestly, choosing a job app from the internet these days is the worst version of Ticketmaster. You don't know if that experience is going to last 2 hours, 2 weeks, 2 months, never start, or be identity theft. Who knows? But the fact that you chose wrong means you won't eat. And the fact that you didn't try to choose again means you also won't eat. So good luck. Yeah? It's nonsense. This is harm reduction now, and it's the foundation for what comes next. You cannot legislate what you cannot see. You cannot organize around a harm that no one has named. The first step is visibility. I think of this as Yelp that transforms into the Google Maps of the hiring process, because in the end, sometimes people are ghosting because it's like a blocked road. You know, they already have enough resumes. They don't need any more. It's not about them being villains for having ghosted. And also sometimes job seekers are going to give reviews of a hiring process. And maybe that doesn't mean the company should change anything. Maybe it's fine. Maybe some people like coffee and some people like tea. It's not a big deal. And it helps people to choose better, you know? In the end, the more the job seeking process isn't like a slot machine for resumes because they actually have access to information, the better off everybody's going to be, you know? The less it's like a slot machine, the more employers are going to do well too. Closing. 1.1 billion rejections. Not a bug, not bias that slipped in. That's the system working exactly as it was designed. And those 1.1 billion aspirations that were shredded out were only in a 4-year period and done utterly in silence without commensurate social conversation or empathy. The Workday lawsuit opens a door, but the room behind it is bigger than one vendor, one algorithm, and one case. This is an industry that sold obstruction as efficiency, that sold the unemployment of the U.S. workforce as something that should be bought and they should generate revenue to create. When it was only ever exclusivity, powered by a captive workforce while it actively created a lemon market in the foundations of the global economy via all the information asymmetry that it itself created. The question now is, do we keep pretending this is about calibration, or do we finally see the architecture for what it is? Because the architecture isn't broken, it's working, and it's been working on the U.S. workforce exactly like this for 25 years. Yeah, so that's it. That's the blog post. I hope you guys will stop by the Job Applicant Perspective for Synonymous user reviews for job ads across the U.S. I'm like, follow, and share. And feel free to engage. I always do like a good challenge. I come at economics, I call myself a diaper economist because I come at it from systems theory. But for me, it's really clear that field of economics needs that a little bit because they have magnificent first principles. I'm not actually better at it than anybody. I'm just not biased into the current line of thinking. I think that's more it. But regardless, sometimes it's like standing outside of closed system. Systems theory talks about it. When you're outside the system, it's easier to see it. When you're inside a system, it's harder to see it. That's how we all are. We all have our blind spots, But anyway, that's me and the Job Applicant Perspective. And I hope you guys stop by. Running a paradigm shift here. It's a challenge, but it's also extremely exciting. I don't know. I really, I like it a lot in that, outside of anything else, I like puzzles, and I never did used to understand Field of Dreams. I never got it before. And since I've had the pleasure of failing so hard that I took a good long look at labor market economics, I actually really enjoyed it a lot. It was almost like playing baseball or something. Like people talk about it. It's not really about the winning. It's about the chance to play. It's a fascinating thing to realize that one of the great failures of my life, which required me to start looking at this because I got really upset and was like, I'm looking at this field. What is going on here? What happened? It has been a genuine pleasure for me. I really enjoy it. It's wild. This is like you picked up a bat and you can play, and it's beautiful. I don't know how to explain it. I found a thing. This is my thing, Anyway, but I mean to say that you have a good field economics, so please stop abusing your first principles, because legit though, George Akerlof, John Nash, and William Jennings would be rolling over in their graves. And that's a thing to think on, Work to be done. But anyway, though, it sounds kind of like the game is afoot. So it's really quite fun. It's a fun thing to do. All right. Have a good one, everybody. Please be kind to each other. Thank you.